Welcome back to Nightly Nonsense, where we make some sense out of the nonsense. When we talk about nonsense, a lot of times we talk about, man-created things, right? And then God working through those man-created things. So again, this whole thing that happened in the last 3 nights, right? This whole idea that the king threw a big party and he told the people they could drink however much they wanted, and then he invites his wife to come out, be a spectacle, and she says no, and then he does what seems like a really good idea when you're angry. He says, I never want to see you again, right? That they've made lots and lots of movies out of, right? And the regret that happens after you say that. But in the midst of all of that, God is going to use all of that, right? He's seemingly pinpointed a way, an opportunity, the method he wants to use to save his people. Now, I want to get stuck there on purpose, right? Guys, listen carefully to me. You cannot get stuck on the way that you think God is going to save you. The way that you think God is going to work in a certain situation, or you may miss out, right? You may miss out on what God has for you. You might deem something unclean because you've never thought of it like that, and it might be clean. Listen, there are so many examples of this, and all of it seems to be hypothetical until you actually hear the testimonies of places that God has seemingly drawn people, taken people, the places that God has put people through, and they've asked, God, are you sure this is what you want me to do? This doesn't make any sense. This is not a place I would normally go. God says yes, and then something crazy happens, right? Crazy things happen when God places people where he wants them to be, and they actually respond, and they do what he's asked them to do. So I want you to look at chapter 2 with me of Esther. And it says this, after these things, so after all of chapter 1, when the anger had abated, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. Right? So again, he remembered. After all the merriment comes the anger. And then after the anger comes a remembering of what happened. Can you imagine becoming a sober king and realize that in the midst of all this merriment, you just sent your queen away? You just said, I don't want to talk to her anymore. I don't want to ever see her again. And it's a decree. It's a decree. You're not going to get back. You're not going to see this woman ever again. They couldn't be undone. Right? So in a fit of rage, in a moment of merriment, this is what happens. This is what happens with us sometimes. In a fit of rage or a moment of merriment, we create things that can't be undone. So this whole thing couldn't be undone. Now again, God's going to use this moment. So you could say, well, God made it this way. God did this, right? No, God didn't do any of this. God knew that this is what was going to happen. Just like he knows what's going to happen with you, what's going to happen with me, and he's going to use it, right? He works all things out together for good, his good, right? But again, that doesn't mean he doesn't allow us to get into situations. We need to be careful about this whole thing. So when the anger goes away, he remembers that, I don't have a wife anymore. I don't have a queen anymore, right? And so again, he consults people and they come up with a great idea. Hey, let's have a beauty contest. So again, if you don't think that the king, if you think that he took that message earlier, like, hey, it sounds like a great idea, let's get rid of my wife. Man, this is a beauty contest where he looks at it and says, like, all right, how about if we gather all the beautiful women together and they can all spend a night with me, and the one that pleases the king can be the next wife. And it says again, this pleased the king and he did so, right? This is crazy, right? Because again, this advice pleased the king in chapter 1. Now this advice again pleases the king in chapter 2. Again, God's going to use all this. He's going to use a beauty contest. Most of us, I've said it 100,000 times, most of us would never put our stamp of approval on a beauty contest. We would never say it was okay. God would not use a beauty contest. He would never put women in a spot like this, right? He would not ask Esther to do this, yet he did, right? The whole essence of the story is, he did. He used this. He used this to save his people in a mighty way. Be careful, though, tonight. I want you to think about the counsel that you're keeping. Are you keeping counsel that always pleases you? They're trying to find and give you information and ways to make you happy, right? To satisfy you. Again, godly counsel isn't always going to do that. Sometimes godly counsel is going to do the opposite. It's going to frustrate you. It's going to hurt you. It's going to convict you. Sometimes you're going to hear, you're the man. Sometimes you're going to have to do hard things. Sometimes you're going to have to forgive. Sometimes you're going to have to do all kinds of things. Godly counsel is super important because it's not just about what pleases you. All of us can go out. We can find that person, those people who are going to say, right, what we want to hear, right? We're going to say what we want to hear. We want to make sure that we have counsel around us that is also willing to say what we don't want to hear. So I'm going to leave it right there with you tonight. I want you to think about that. Are you surrounded by people who are only going to give you pleasing advice, or are you going to surround yourself with some people who aren't afraid to give you advice that isn't going to please you so much? Right? If you say, no, most of the people I'm surrounded with, they think like me, they talk like me, they act like me, they say the things that I agree with, and we're always in agreement, right? Pray for God to bring you somebody who'd be willing to disagree with you, right? Somebody who'd be willing to say, nope, not going to agree with that. But most important, do you have some godly people around you? Some godly people who are going to say, thus saith the Lord, when everybody around you is saying, thus saith man. We want godly advice, godly wisdom. We want godly counsel. Chew on that. We'll see you next time. Nightly Nonsense.